Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, president and founder of the Current Consulting Group. We want to invite you to visit our website at currentconsultinggroup.com to find the archive of all of our past episodes of Currently Speaking. As well, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms. And when you do, we encourage you to like it, to subscribe, to share, help other people find out about it so we can grow our viewership. So I am joined today by Ken Fichtler, the founder and CEO of Gaize. And we've done some podcasts and webinars before in the past, but Gaize is at sort of an interesting place in its history right now. So it just seemed like perfect timing to have Ken back on. Welcome, Ken, to the show.
Thanks so much, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I just sort of to set the table, obviously during the election just a few weeks ago, marijuana was on the ballot in several states, and there were some surprising results there. We can do a different webinar on that subject, but the whole issue of being able to identify or measure impairment in the workplace is more and more at the forefront, I think, for many employers, especially in safety-sensitive industries. And Gaize has now been in the market for about 18 months. What's been the response so far, Ken? And tell us a little bit about Gaize.
Sure. So by way of background, Gaize is an impairment detection technology platform. And so what we do is we measure various eye movement changes that can result from impairment in order to measure whether or not someone is experiencing impairment in the moment. And the rationale really for this is that chemical drug tests, while very useful, can only tell us if someone has a chemical in their body, and it can't distinguish whether someone is currently impaired by that chemical or just previously used it. So another way to think about this is that alcohol works very differently in the body than most drugs. And so we're able to understand if someone is experiencing impairment by measuring the amount of alcohol that's in the body. The same is not true for cannabis or really most other drugs. And so what we have to then do is look at how the body is responding to those drugs in order to understand if impairment is happening. So that's what Gaize does.
And what's been the response so far?
Yeah, and so the response from the market has been, I'll say, interesting. It's been really good in some ways and bad in others. We launched with the focus of our primary market being law enforcement. And our assumption was that law enforcement would be ready to spend money to solve this problem immediately. That was proven to not be the case. They are a very slow to change sort of group. And so introducing new technology into law enforcement is notoriously difficult. And so we kind of spun our wheels, frankly, for a bit in the law enforcement market before pivoting to focus entirely on commercial late last year. Since making that decision, the response from the commercial market has been really, really strong. And so in the course of the last, call it, year, a little over a year that we've been really spending our time focused on that, we've established ourselves as I think the leading technology at impairment detection, and our customers are really, frankly, pretty incredible. We've landed companies that I didn't think we'd even talk to for the first 5 or 10 years of this company existing. So today we have customers ranging from very small, less than 50 employees, all the way to very large businesses, with our largest being in the Fortune 150 range. We've got quite a number of Fortune 500 companies on at this point, quite a number of publicly traded companies. And so I'm very proud of the response we've gotten from the market. And I really feel like that tells us that we're onto something and doing something that really matters and solves the problem that companies are faced with.
It's interesting you put it in those terms. As our audience knows, I do several webinars a month with various companies, and invariably, regardless of the topic, I'll get asked which drug testing method is best at identifying impairment. And the truth of the matter is, and I say it every time, drug testing doesn't prove impairment. Either scientifically or legally, a drug test result can't be used to definitively accuse somebody or claim that somebody is impaired on the job. But the Gaize technology is the opposite. It's all about identifying impairment. And you mentioned, some very large companies that have bought in and like the technology. What seems to be the best fit among companies that are looking at this, and what kind of results are they having?
Yeah, I mean the companies that we go after are those that employ safety sensitive positions, and so those are industries like construction, manufacturing, logistics, oil and gas, mining. Those all sort of have people that can show up at work and hurt themselves or hurt someone else in the course of their duties. And so those are the roles that we really need to have people who are verifiably fit for duty, and that's what Gaize does. The outcomes have been, really positive for our customers. We've enabled businesses, I think, to detect impairment, which is really important, particularly in places where cannabis is legal, because they're faced with the challenge of not enough workers. They need to retain the employees that they do have. There's some interesting studies that have come out in the last couple of years showing that more Americans are using cannabis daily than alcohol now. And another from the federal government showed that 22% of Americans have used cannabis in the last year. So this is not an insignificant portion of the population, and businesses really need to figure out how to hire and retain these workers while also maintaining workplace safety. And so our product allows for them to do that. Some good examples. One would be we've got a customer that's in a very prominent manufacturing organization to make batteries or battery components for electric cars. And one of the things that happened very early on in that deployment was they had an employee bump a forklift into a pallet of goods. And that employee was a cannabis using employee. And so their process was that employee would have had to go through a drug test historically, and they would have lost that employee. That employee would have had to be fired. Using Gaize, they were able to test that employee for impairment, verify that they were fit for duty, and get them back to work within about 20 minutes. That's both a job that was retained, a training exercise that didn't have to be gone through, a hiring exercise that didn't have to be gone through, and there's a lot of time that was saved too. Sending out someone for a chemical drug test and then having them sit on the sidelines for a week while those results come back is very expensive. So Gaize was able to save all of that time and money as well, which I think is a really positive story. We've had a lot of other, stories where impairment was detected and there were other outcomes there. But at the end of the day, I think what we're doing is we're keeping workplaces a lot safer than has been possible in the past. So that's really encouraging. We've never churned a customer. We've never lost a customer. So that's, I think, another really good indication that what we're doing is actually working.
So in certain situations, employers nowadays, and this is something that we learn in our annual Current Consulting Group drug testing industry survey, we're hearing from people in the drug testing business that they have clients that are either dropping marijuana from their drug test panel altogether, or maybe they're not doing pre-employment testing, or they're not doing random testing because they're kind of skittish when it comes to the whole marijuana issue. And it sounds to me from some of the experiences that your clients are having, it's that they can kind of have their cake and eat it too, so to speak, the old adage, right? They can, be respectful of the legal use of marijuana on somebody's own time, comply with the laws that apply to them in the states where they do business, but at the same time, address impairment in the workplace.
Exactly. Yeah. And we talk to customers all the time or prospects all the time that want to or have dropped THC testing. And I always tell them, that's a terrible idea. Please don't do that. It's really important that you have consistency across your organization too. So if you're not doing pre-employment testing for THC, and then you are doing THC testing in the case of, an incident, there's kind of a fundamental disconnect there, and you run a huge risk of losing good workers if you're doing that. And Gaize really, I think, enables businesses to have someone, again, that is safely and responsibly using cannabis and still can come to work, be demonstrably fit for duty, and do their job safely.
Yeah, and it seems to me that in this sort of environment where many industries or companies within many industries are finding it very difficult to find people to hire. Mm-hmm. Once you do find someone to hire, you want to keep them. And this is just another way to secure the safety of the workplace, but also retain good workers.
Exactly. And that, construction is a good example where this is a very acute problem. Our construction customers are routinely saying, we have to hire people, and so we can't be testing for THC. That puts everyone at risk on a job site, particularly one where you're working at great height or with heavy materials, things like that. it's a really challenging problem. And so we've had a huge surge of customers in the construction space, specifically because they need to solve this problem.
So one of the things I think many buyers are looking for before they make a decision to adopt a relatively new technology, or at least new to them, is, data to back up the claims. Or, I
Yeah.
mean, what kind of research have you done at Gaize, and where's that taking you?
We've done a couple in-house trials, but I'll start by saying that our technology is built on the drug recognition expert evaluation process. And so the drug recognition expert process is what law enforcement has used for about 45 years to find out about non-alcohol impaired driving situations. So basically, if someone is found to or suspected of being of driving while impaired, they blow a 0 on a breathalyzer. They then will go through a drug recognition expert evaluation to find out what's going on here. And these are experts that are recognized as such in almost every state, and are able to, with very good accuracy, kind of like mid to high 80 percentile accuracy, figure out if impairment is being experienced and what drug category that's coming from. So that's the foundation that our product was built on, which gives us a really high level of defensibility. On top of that, we've done several in-house clinical trials. The first was a cannabis impairment clinical trial. That was the largest cannabis impairment clinical trial ever conducted. And that provided a huge amount of data for us to both train and validate our product. We just wrapped up an alcohol clinical trial that did basically the same thing as our cannabis one, but basically we had people consume alcohol. We tested them with a breathalyzer. We then tested them with Gaize. We're still evaluating that data, but again, our product is proving to be extremely accurate at detecting the indicators of alcohol impairment. In process, we have one for prescription drugs that can have a psychotropic effect. So things like antipsychotics, antidepressants, ADHD medication, benzodiazepines, substances like that can be misused or cause things that could appear to be impairing. And so we want to understand, what is happening with these drugs. Most of them have never been studied in this way. And so this is a really important study that we're just kicking off now. And then we've got a handful of others that we have planned in the coming year. We hope to study meth and fentanyl. We are working with another researcher or a research institution for that. We've got a research partner for a fatigue study that we're trying to pull together in 25. And we've got a number of other kind of like smaller scale cannabis studies that we'll engage with. And then in-house, we'd like to do a kratom study and a ketamine study as well. So we're working on finding partners for those.
It's interesting. Where, first of all, before I go to the next question,
Yep.
Where can people who are interested in seeing the results of these studies, is that on your website, or should they contact you directly?
Yeah, either way. We have a page on our website all about our research. And so we need to update that for our alcohol study now that it's complete, but the cannabis study is up there. The process of publishing peer-reviewed papers takes a long time, it turns out. And so I expect that'll be complete for our cannabis study early next year, and then alcohol will probably be late next year. And then, these other trials that are happening both now and into 25 will be basically a year after those get done, I think, or in that range.
Yeah, that's actually quite an accomplishment. I've been published in peer-reviewed journals, and it's a very rigorous process. So Congratulations. That'll be great when that comes out. Now, going forward, like, what challenges do you see for Gaize? I'm thinking specifically, like, if the federal government reclassifies THC as a Schedule 3 drug instead of Schedule 1, how does that affect Gaize? Is that a positive, a negative, or, how do you see the future there?
Yeah, it's a really important question that I wish I had a clearer answer to. Specifically, I'm interested in how they would deal with the DOT regulations, which completely are, zero tolerance for THC in the body. So much so that DOT drivers can't even utilize CBD, which is a huge challenge. And a very large number of DOT workers are let go every year as a result of finding trace amounts of THC in their body. So that's a really big problem that I haven't seen any answer to in terms of what the federal government would do in that case. I think that education is our biggest challenge internally. There's really a broad lack of awareness of impairment detection technology by the public. The pervasive understanding still is that there's no way to check for cannabis impairment. That's just simply not true anymore. There's also, I think, a broad desire amongst government and law enforcement to have some sort of a per se limit like we do for alcohol. So that would be, like the 0.08 we have for alcohol. The problem with doing that for cannabis or really most other drugs is that that's just not how these things are metabolized in the body. You cannot look at the amount of substance and understand the experience impairment. And so every scientific study that's ever looked at this issue has come to the same conclusion. There's no scientific question left about this. But that message has not exactly been received. I think it is slowly happening, and you can see that happening in states like California and Washington that have created laws that protect cannabis users from some metabolite-based drug testing, but that's not exactly the solution that we need either. So there's a lot of, I think, policy considerations that are still question marks, and really the government needs to be investigating impairment detection technology. And I say that, of course, as the leader of one of the companies in that space, but as a citizen, we really need to be looking at this and understanding how do we accurately and fairly police impaired driving for cannabis. And frankly, the drug tests that exist today are just not going to do that for us.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's room in this space for fitness for duty or impairment detection, et cetera, as many employers still grapple with the whole issue, especially of marijuana. Now, I did get asked, I had somebody call me probably a month ago, maybe, but they asked about biometric privacy laws. Mm-hmm. And I only know what I know about those because of my, association and friendship with you. But what's the issue there? And how, should employers be concerned about that?
Yeah, this is something that employers should have on their radar for sure. So basically, there's some biometric information privacy laws, and Illinois has the most kind of robust, and it's called BIPA, the Biometric Information Privacy Act. And what that's doing basically is trying to safeguard private biometric information from being used by an organization or by the government. And what the definition basically is biometric information is information that can be correlated back to an individual. So that's things like the specific geometry of facial features, or other specific sort of features that like specific wrinkle lines or moles or something like that. That could be you could take that data and then correlate it back to some specific person. We've designed our product from the ground up to not capture biometric information. So we capture basically a couple types of information. The first is pupil size. Then we have gaze direction, so just the direction that the eyes are looking. Both of those captured to an extremely high level of precision. And then we capture test video. And basically what we're capturing is something that's about like that. So, and it's an infrared. So we don't get the skin color, we don't get eye color. We're not getting any retinal characteristics. We can't do a corneal print from our video. So there's nothing that we capture that can be correlated back to an individual. So that's really important. But this is absolutely something that businesses need to be aware of. If they're capturing things like a facial scan for building entrance or job site entrance, something like that, that could be biometric information, and likely is. And so that needs to be something that they're considering.
Interesting. So in conclusion, what's the future look like for Gaize?
The future, I think, is really bright for us. We have an extremely accurate product that has a very, very strong foundation. We've been doing some really interesting research on top of that. And so I'll start by saying our product is the most accurate tool to detect the drug recognition and the drug recognition expert indicators of impairment today. From that foundation, we've also been exploring some additional data and finding new and novel indicators of impairment. And so we've been in the process for the last, call it year or so, of building out some new models that are going to really push the boundaries, I think, of accuracy in detecting what substance category is causing impairment. So a great example is cannabis. We've got the most cannabis data in the world. We have been very actively studying that, and we've created models that recognize some brand new indicators of impairment that are previously unknown to science. And so we're going to keep the drug recognition expert indicators. We're also going to add a secondary processing step. And so in the case where we find drug recognition expert indicators of impairment, we'll then shovel the data into a secondary processing step. And from our customer's perspective, this will be completely seamless. But on the back end, what's going to happen is these additional models that we've created are going to be looking at this data and forming an opinion about basically, are the DRE indicators pointing us towards a specific substance category or not? And so we can basically confirm or deny what's happening at a much higher level of accuracy than has ever been possible before. And so I think that's a really exciting advent that we're working towards very accurately or very, very rapidly. And we should be able to launch hopefully soon. The other thing is, I think with this additional research that we're doing, we're capturing very large amounts of very high resolution data. And so that's really going to allow us to continue to tweak and tune our models to improve the accuracy for some substances that are frankly a little bit less studied than even cannabis. So things like kratom are just not well studied in terms of what the effects are. And we really need to be able to understand how these things are how they're producing impairment, how that manifests in the body, and can it be detected? The answer appears to be from our small amount of data so far that yes, we can, but we need to really shore that up with a clinical validation that is peer reviewed again and shows us very conclusively that the answer is yes, and that's important work that we're doing.
That's some pretty cool stuff. So once again, how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to learn more about Gaize?
So our website is gaize.ai, gaize.ai. I can be reached at ken@gaize.ai. And again, we've got all our research on there. You can reach out if you're not seeing anything that you're interested in. We're always happy to have conversations. I've been contacted by a couple of people recently that want to try to defeat our technologies. I'm always interested in doing little tests like that with someone who wants to get high and prove to me that they can pass our test, and I'm very confident that they can't. So things like that are great. We've got researchers that reach out from time to time as well that want to include us in their trials. So we're very open to things like that.
Well, thank you, Ken, for joining us on this episode of Currently Speaking. I know that you're at a lot of conferences and it's a little bit ahead of time, but you'll be at the NDASA conference in April, right?
I will. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. That's always a great conference, and we'll see a lot of our friends there, I think.
Yep, Gaize will have a booth there, actually right across the aisle from the Current Consulting Group booth. So we look forward to seeing you then, if not sooner. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Currently Speaking. Again, if you'd like to learn more about our past episodes, go to currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll find a lot of information there. And of course, visit Gaize at their website to learn more about impairment detection technology. I really think that this is with us. This is going to be part of the future of drug-free workplace programs. So thank you again, Ken, for joining us.
My
and
pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us. We'll see you next time on Currently Speaking.